this made a pretty good move throughout the day and then just squeezed right at the end. Um, had pretty much the whole market's attention the other week, last week. And it was like 230, 220, 230 some 100 million shares traded. That was 4 days ago. It gapped up and has really been just on an uptrend ever since then. I think what we're seeing is a lot of people, or rather a lot of short positions, get um, squeezed. If you kind of look at the 5 minute, you can just kind of see these huge moves to the upside. I mean, even yesterday it was a huge spike up, and then today it's a real grind in the morning, and then about midday or so we kind of saw a bigger move. I mean, had some okay volume on the open, but really just kind of hovered around VWAP. Really, we kind of stayed between this 228 and 285 range. Nothing on too much big volume. We see the break of the 285 with some volume, definitely a sign of strength. And then we start to test this 315 level. 315 is a level established on the daily. A little bit of a consolidation point. Looks like a couple months ago, maybe back in January that was. And once we break that, then you really see a huge squeeze up. There probably was a good amount of people, possibly, possibly short still from then, although they might have exited earlier. But definitely that 315 level, huge level. Break that, tons of volume, and now we're hovering above right around the 3.4 level. I mean, we kind of had a little bit of a range between 3.65, I would say, and 3.4 on decent volume, but very volatile. Once it broke that 315, it definitely got a lot of people's attention as we start to see more volume come in. But it really has just faded out in this after hours, so not getting much attention. I think on the open, or rather tomorrow, it's going to need to definitely hold this 315 level. For a bigger move on the upside, it's going to be closer to 340. And then in the morning, it's going to need to break this 3.6, 3.66, 3.65 level for another possible move to the upside. I mean, we are fairly extended on the daily, so depending on if it gets attention or not, could see a bigger retracement, well below 3. I mean, maybe at the 275 range. Looks to be like a possible point of consolidation, although we might have a couple stops here and there on the way down. So it all depends on what happens tomorrow in the pre-market. If it holds 315, gets close to 340, might see a break. Otherwise, might see a retracement. It had decent volume today, 45 million. I mean, it's not a lot relative to a few days ago. Huge move in the price action within the day, though, on lower volume. Probably means there was a good amount of position squeeze that forced up that price action. Probably will be hard to duplicate that tomorrow. Although, let me double check. I do believe this is a low float. Yeah, low float. So, I mean, it does have the possibility, but it's played a few technical moves here the past few days. It'd be hard to kind of see that continue without another catalyst. All right, let's look at JZXN, low float retail stock, gapped up this morning on some news, but then just retraced very hard. I mean, if we look here on this 5 minute, essentially gapping up from 130 to 2.5, which kind of was a level roughly. I mean, maybe the 2.4 range was more so on the daily. probably more so of a test of that. A few spikes up, doesn't hold, and then just when it breaks VWAP, it just really retraces all that move very hard. Very volatile on the open, um, with a bunch of volume. I mean, on the daily we did almost have, I would say, almost a little bit of a gap, but not necessarily. Kind of from that 1.7 to 137 range, and so that's where you see these lines. It kind of holds that 1.7 support for a while. I mean, first it tests, VWAP on decent volume, but just couldn't hold. I think this pre-market retracement, just such a huge sign of weakness. I'm sure no one's really going to have huge confidence in that until maybe it breaks VWAP and gets closer to 225. So you're not going to see a huge amount of people really buying. Kind of plays off this 1.7 support, then the rest of the day just kind of a sideways trade. I think, on the open we hit this like 210 level. I mean, there's nothing really that stands out on the daily. Maybe like a $2 range. I think it's going to need to see more volume, which is perhaps unlikely. Volume just drastically faded out throughout the day. It's going to need to see a break of VWAP for sure, and then possibly two. And maybe a break of 210 gives it a bigger move on the upside. But you still got to go all the way to this 2.445 level for a huge move. And I just, based off what I'm seeing right here, I don't necessarily think that's going to be likely. Huge retracement today, with volume faded out. Not necessarily as bullish on this. Let's take a look at FRGE. This squeezed up kind of later in the day. On the daily, we had some pretty volatile big moves the other week, reaching a high of 47. It's a pretty volatile stock, I think. I mean, if you kind of look at when it gets good volume, it really moves. I mean, even today, it only had about 7 million shares traded at volume, but you can see how big of a move we made. I mean, going from like 1250 to essentially 2050. It's a pretty big move on not as big of volume. So we had the move a few days ago, or rather like a few weeks ago. Huge retracement from 47. Maybe a little bit of a consolidation point at this, I don't know, 840 range. Let's see, 840, 960 almost. Nothing really too big that stands out. I mean, we kind of see it a few days ago. It kind of played off this like 825 level, and I think off of that level is when you see a huge spike in volume and price action. That's where we go from essentially 825 to that 2050. Probably a few people in a few positions short from a few days ago, and then not much volume to really sustain it, or not much of a catalyst to really sustain it. So that's why you see a big retracement with huge volatile candles to the downside on the backside of this move. Nothing to really hold it. It was pretty much a slower grind throughout the day, kind of playing off of VWAP. A little bit of a spike in the morning, maybe just gathering some people's attention, but then really just kind of played around VWAP and just slowly grinded. You can see volume starts to come in more off of perhaps these more little breakouts over kind of these daily kind of resistance levels, 1540 or so. Just a bit of a slower grind, and then just kind of breaking out, making new highs. Kind of seems to be what the trend was, and then it kind of goes up to that 825 level, as we just said, squeezes and retraces down. I think right now in the after hours, it's kind of hovering around that 8. I mean, it's really volatile. It's kind of bouncing like almost 715 to 1840. I mean, low volume, so it's kind of hard to really follow price action on this in the after hours. But I think really need to hold VWAP. So basically, I think we need to hold 17. And then, I think a break of probably this 1920 range, kind of a little bit of consolidation on this gap up. It's probably where a lot of short positions got in, saying, oh, this is the backside of the move, showing weakness, get in, and obviously it paid out for them. If for day trade, I think if we kind of stay up as 18 pre-market and kind of can push past this 1920, might see another little pop. I don't necessarily think it'll be a huge move. I think if anything's crazy volatile to happen, you'd have to probably be like a break of almost 28, 27.50 or so, just looking off the daily. So it's got a huge way to go. Although it is possible, this tends to make big volatile moves on less volume, but without a direct catalyst, it might be hard to see this with follow through. On the other side, you can't really hold, I'd say 1720, this kind of point of consolidation, 1720 at the end of the day. A break of that, you might see just a further retracement down to probably that 15.4 range, and then again breaking that further down. But we'll see how it gets the attention in pre-market and on the open.